So this episode was probably most people's idea of a science fiction show back in the 60s, which is the main reason the studio decided to show this episode first. What happens when a buffalo gets on board your ship and uses its hypnotic attractiveness to lure in your crew and suck the salt right out of them? It's an age-old question we've all asked ourselves at one time in our lives or another. Well, Star Trek is here to finally put the matter to rest in The Man Trap. Hit it! Hey! So like I said, despite this one being the 5th episode produced, not counting the cage, the studio wanted this one to be the first one people saw, even before the pilot, which actually got broadcast third. It's all very weird, and it's why I'm doing these in production order, because this way you can see the evolution of some of the characters and relationships and even just the look of the show. This is the first of 14 appearances of Star Trek legend Mark Daniels in the director's chair. He'll be responsible for such Star Trek classics as Space Seed, Mirror Mirror, and, well, yeah, okay, Spock's Brain. But let's start this adventure with a look at the plot. One of the duties of Starfleet is to send a ship every year to restock and check out the health of remote scientific research teams on distant planets. So that's why the Enterprise has arrived at the poetically named planet M113. So Dr. McCoy can check out Dr. Robert Crater and his wife Nancy. Slight problem, Nancy is an old girlfriend of Dr. McCoy's, and the one that got away, as they say. So he's got some stuff on his mind when he goes down to the planet. Well, the captain's log states that Kirk and McCoy beamed down, and it don't even mention crewman Darnell, so you just know he ain't coming back. And Kirk breaks McCoy's balls a little bit about meeting Nancy after all these years, and tells him he ought to bring her some wheat from out in the yard for some reason. Kirk's a weird guy. Anyway, they go into where the Craters are living, but they don't find nobody. But it ain't long until Nancy shows up, but there's something hinky going on. McCoy sees a young woman he recognizes as Nancy, Kirk sees the same lady only about 10 or so years older, and Darnell sees a completely different woman who he says looks like somebody he met on Wrigley's Pleasure Planet. And this dingleberry can't shut up about it. No, seriously, Dr. McCoy, your ex-girlfriend looks just like this hooker I was with just last week, and she was... And I didn't know you could even get pickles in that part of town. And then... And then here come the bagpipes, and she was all... And I was like, that's a lot of nougat, but she... But I was like, calm down. It's only Wednesday, for Christ's sake. What? Get the f*** out of here. So they kick Darnell out, and Nancy decides to go looking for Dr. Crater. As she passes Darnell outside, still looking to him like that lady he was talking about, she gives him a little smile that makes him feel like he might be able to write another chapter in that epic story. So he follows her off someplace. Inside, McCoy marvels at how Nancy hasn't aged a day. And instead of letting his friend have his moment, Captain Give Her Some Wheat over here has to point out, dude, no, she's totally old. About that time, Dr. Crater comes in and clearly don't want these guys here. He says he only needs some salt tablets because the climate is so hot and dry, but that's it. McCoy says you ain't getting nothing till we're able to check you out, so he calms down a little. And when Dr. Crater finds out that Dr. McCoy is the same one he's heard Nancy talk about, he seems to soften up a little more. And it's about that time they all hear a lady screaming. They run out and find Nancy screaming over the body of crewman Darnell, dead with these circular red marks on his face. They find a plant in his mouth, and Nancy said she saw him eating the plant, which she identifies as a Borgia plant, and tried to warn him it was poisonous, but it was too late. Cut to the bridge where Uhura is bored and trying to make small talk with Spock and not making a lot of progress, when the report comes in that the landing party have been back with one casualty. Uhura gets a little miffed that Spock don't seem too troubled by it, but he says, what's that gonna do? I can't bring nobody back from the dead. McCoy can't figure out what killed the guy, but he knows it ain't poison, because there ain't no poison in the body. No Borgia plant either, except what they got out of his mouth. Spock does some research and confirms that them red wings on his face, those ain't a symptom of eating a Borgia plant either. After the commercial break, McCoy figures out that all of the salt has been removed from Darnell's body. But he's got no idea how that could have happened. Kirk and Spock beam down with a couple of crewmen looking for Dr. Crater and Nancy. They find Dr. Crater, and he runs off to find Nancy. One of the crewmen, Sturgeon, gets eaten almost immediately. The other crewman, Green, gets eaten a little later, and then Nancy shapeshifts into Green. Well, that explains the whole 3 different Nancys earlier. Masquerading as Green, the creature beams up to the Enterprise with Kirk and Spock. As Green, the creature runs into Yeoman Rand, who is carrying a tray of food with a very obvious salt shaker. He starts acting really weird and creepy and follows her to the botanical lab, where Sulu is waiting for the tray. Green wanders around awkwardly staring at things, mostly the salt shaker, doesn't say a word, and then leaves. Outside, Green spots Uhura and shapeshifts into a crewman who speaks Swahili. She asks if they've met before, and he tells her that they haven't, but she was thinking about someone just like him just before they met. So the creature can read your mind and take the shape of somebody that would be attractive to you. That explains why McCoy saw the younger Nancy earlier. Aha! Well, he seems to put her into a hypnotic spell and almost gets all of her salt, but she snaps out of it when she gets called to the bridge. Since he couldn't get Uhura's salt, crewman Barnhart had to do. But now the cat's out of the bag that the creature is now on the ship. Kirk and Spock have had about enough, and they go down to grab old Grumpy Bob and drag his ass back to the ship to help find the creature. He's hiding out and has apparently raided the prop closet for one of them lawn sprinkler phases from the pilot. They pull a distraction maneuver and zap him with a stun blast. While he's all woozy, he explains that Nancy is actually a creature that killed the real Nancy a year or 2 ago and needs salt to survive, and that it's the last of its kind and the rest died out because they ran out of salt. He wanted to kill it for killing the real Nancy, but he saw it as being like the buffalo, about to be extinct, so he made a deal that it would be Nancy for him and he would keep it alive. A little gross, but yeah. Back on the Enterprise, the creature has become Nancy again and convinced McCoy to take some sleeping pills. And while he's out, Nancy turns into McCoy. Later in the conference room, the Enterprise staff, including the creature disguised as McCoy and Dr. Crater, discuss how they can capture the creature. Kirk asks Crater if he can recognize the creature when it's disguised as someone other than Nancy, and he says that he can, but he's not helping to capture it. McCoy makes an interesting suggestion.
I say we let him go.
No! But no one seems to think this is strange. Spock suggests they use truth serum on Crater, which is apparently a thing, and McCoy agrees. Spock says he'll go with them to sickbay. Well, cut to sickbay, and Crater has been salt-sucked, and Spock managed to survive just because he's got different blood in his tubes. Turns out he did think McCoy was acting goofy, and went along to test that theory. Unfortunately, the creature escaped. It shifts back into Nancy and makes a beeline to McCoy's quarters, where she wakes him up where he's been sleeping under what looks like weird little busts of Spock, and tells him they're coming for her and he's got to defend her. Kirk shows up with some salt tablets and is all,
"Want a Twinkie, Genghis Khan?" "Say please."
She ends up going for the tablets and McCoy is in a total crisis. She attacks the captain and McCoy can't bring himself to shoot Nancy. Spock shows up and hilariously tries to beat the snot out of Nancy to prove she ain't Nancy, good thing she wasn't, and then gets sent across the room with one blow from the thing. McCoy still don't seem convinced, but then the creature reveals its true self and it ain't pretty. It tries to salt suck the captain who starts screaming, and McCoy finally is able to pull the trigger. And then everybody goes, well, that sucked, and it's on to the next adventure. Roll credits. Great stuff. So like I said, one of the benefits of doing these in production order is you get to see the evolution of the characters. Uhura hasn't gotten a lot to do or say in the episodes up to this point, but her exchange with Spock is fantastic and really showcases the fact that Uhura has a personality, and it's a pretty great one.
Why don't you tell me I'm an attractive young lady, or ask me if I've ever been in love? Tell me how your planet Vulcan looks on a lazy evening when the moon is full.
Vulcan has no moon, Miss Uhura.
I'm not surprised, Mr. Spock.
Transporter room to bridge.
Where has this Uhura been? Clearly finally wearing red brings out her personality, huh? We also get a kind of mini Kirk speech in this episode.
You saving the last of its kind, or has this become Crater's private heaven here on this planet? This thing becomes wife, lover, best friend, wise man, fool, idle, slave. Isn't a bad life to have everyone in the universe at your beck and call. And you win all the arguments. You don't understand.
It ain't the greatest, but Kirk speeches will always be great stuff. There may be one or two exceptions to that later. The design of the creature is actually pretty scary for the time. And I like that we don't really see the creature's real form until the very end. A lot of work had to go into that costume for it to only be shown for a few seconds, but hey, that's show business. The Goof. It don't play a part in the story at all, but this thing right here is number 1 on this episode's Goof list. You gotta be kidding me. I don't know what else to say about that. Another thing that makes me laugh every time is what happens when Kirk pops Crater with the stun blast from his phaser. The ricochet sound effect and the sped up film just kind of makes it weirdly comical. They also slowed down Crater's speech to simulate the stun effect, which isn't that bad, but it had been a while since I'd seen this episode, and I didn't get that was supposed to be the stun effect at first. I just thought something was wrong with the audio. I wonder if there were a lot of other people who thought that too. Not a bad idea, but they should have called it out a little more than they did. They mentioned it, but it should have been more probably. Ruminations. The Man Trap is really more than just a Monster of the Week episode. It really delves into the effects of extreme loneliness on somebody, accentuated by being set against the backdrop of a long-dead civilization. Crater is a deeply broken man who couldn't even remember how long ago the real Nancy died and the creature took her place. And he has latched on to that replacement for his dead wife so much that his loyalty to it puts everyone's lives in danger. Crater's passivity is as much the bad guy as the creature is. They don't really say, but it seems pretty clear the dead civilization ain't the salt creatures. And it's hard to get a beat on exactly how intelligent the creatures are supposed to be. On the one hand, it can talk and assume different shapes based on what's in your mind, and when it was McCoy, it was arguing for its own survival. But self-preservation doesn't necessarily mean intelligence, and all of that could just be stimulus reactions to what it's sensing in people's minds, you know? Like when it's green, it acts so incredibly weird that it's a miracle he didn't get reported to HR. In the absence of powerful mental images and expectations of green from Rand and Sulu, all it could do is stare at stuff and walk around all creepy as hell. And one doesn't really liken the last of an intelligent species to the buffalo. So I think the implication is that they aren't intelligent. So the civilization must have been someone else, right? I wonder who. Another thing about the creature, I wonder if Crater ever actually saw the creature's true form. It's always interesting when you have a creature that can change shape like that. Because I wonder if such a creature existed, would it even have a quote-unquote natural form? I think it would have to be more like Odo, who we don't know about yet, of course. Just kind of a formless blob of liquid. Because it seems as though any kind of definite shape like this would also be a choice made by the creature. If I was to make a change to this story, I think I wouldn't reveal the shape-shifting ability of the creature until after they discover Green's body on the planet, knowing that Green had beamed up with them, and then thinking back on when they first arrived and realizing that everybody was seeing a different lady. The audience would only have seen the older version of Nancy in that scene, so we would have been just as confused as the characters. You'd have to rearrange things so people saw the creature at different times, though, because shape-shifting don't make it so two people are seeing two different shapes at the exact same time. That part didn't really make sense. That's more of a mind manipulation thing, so we'd have to fix that. Lots of ruminations on this one. Wasn't really expecting that with this episode. To tell you the truth, I wasn't really excited about this one. But I think there's a lot more there than I was giving it credit for. But then, that's Star Trek, right? So there you have it, The Man Trap. Shatner wrote in his memoir, Star Trek Memories, that this was one of the worst episodes they did. And know if I agree with that, but it definitely wasn't one of the best. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments. If you're liking the reviews here, give me a thumbs up on that like button down there. Really helps the channel out. And hey, spread it around. If you got some Star Trek friends, share the video and invite them to join us over here. In the next episode, everybody gets drunk. So make sure you come back for The Naked Time. Until then, possum friends are awesome friends. Take it easy, alright? Later.